How to control key squares with a bishop in the endgame. Have you ever wondered how to effectively control key squares with a bishop during the endgame? This is a vital skill that can make a big difference in your chess games. Let's break it down step by step. First, it is important to understand how a bishop moves. A bishop travels diagonally across the board and can only reach squares of the same color it started on. This means that if your bishop is on light squares, it cannot control dark squares, and vice versa. In the endgame, especially when you are up against a knight, your goal is to use the bishop's long-range ability to block or limit access to important squares. Key squares are those that, if controlled, can lead to winning a pawn, promoting a pawn, or stopping your opponent from making progress. When facing a knight, remember that it moves in an L shape and can jump over other pieces. Since the bishop cannot control squares of the opposite color, you need to think strategically. If the key squares are on the color your bishop does not control, you cannot defend them directly. Instead, focus on controlling the squares that lead to those key squares. For instance, if the knight needs to reach a dark square to win a pawn, and your bishop is on light squares, position your bishop to block the light squares the knight must use to get to the dark square. This way, you can restrict the knight's movement and keep it from reaching its target. In practical terms, aim to place your bishop on diagonals that cut off the knight's path. If you can keep the knight from reaching the squares it needs, you can often draw or even win the game. Sometimes, you may need to sacrifice time or even a pawn to maintain your bishop in the right position. In pawnless endgames, especially in knight versus bishop scenarios, the bishop's ability to control distant squares can be decisive. The bishop can dominate the knight by restricting its movement, particularly if the knight is near the edge of the board or cannot reach its target squares. To control key squares effectively, first identify which squares your opponent needs to reach. Next, determine if your bishop can control those squares directly or indirectly. Position your bishop to block your opponent's pieces from reaching those squares. If the key squares are on the opposite color, use your bishop to control the approach squares, making it harder for your opponent to make progress. This method is especially useful in fast-paced games, where time pressure can make it challenging for your opponent to find the best moves. By focusing on controlling key squares with your bishop, you can increase your chances of holding a draw or converting an advantage into a win.